Have you ever felt like your mind never truly slows down? Like your thoughts move faster than the world around you? Constantly connecting ideas, questioning reality, and searching for meaning in everything? So this is not random. This is Gemini energy awakening over time. Gemini is often misunderstood. Labeled as unstable, inconsistent, or divided, the Gemini sign actually carries one of the most powerful evolutionary paths in the zodiac. What many people fail to realize is that Gemini is not here to stay the same, Gemini is here to become. And along this journey of becoming, something profound happens inside. Throughout life, Gemini develops inner strengths that cannot be taught, forced, or rushed. They are forged through experiences, emotional contradictions, inner conflicts, and the constant dialogue of the Gemini mind. Every question, every change of direction, every moment of doubt is shaping something deeper, something stronger. This video is not about surface-level astrology. It is a message from the universe for those who feel there is more behind the Gemini duality than meets the eye. Because Gemini duality is not a flaw, it's a training ground. A space where adaptability becomes intelligence, curiosity becomes wisdom, and chaos slowly transforms into clarity. As an air sign, Gemini's thoughts are always in motion. But over time, you learn that not every thought needs an answer, and not every voice in your head needs to be followed. This is where the first inner strength begins to form. And from there, a chain reaction unfolds. During Gemini season, many feel energized, inspired, and mentally alive. But what happens beyond the season? What happens as years pass, relationships change, and life tests your emotional depth? The Gemini personality evolves in silence, strength by strength, lesson by lesson. On this journey, Gemini learns how to listen, not just to others but to the universe itself. Signs appear, patterns repeat, and suddenly life starts speaking in symbols. This is where another message from the universe reveals itself, guiding Gemini towards self-mastery rather than distraction. Most people only see Gemini traits on the surface: communication, charm, intelligence. But they rarely talk about resilience, emotional flexibility, spiritual perception, and the ability to hold multiple truths without losing identity. These are inner strengths built over a lifetime. And then comes the fifth strength, the one that changes everything, the one that most people never expect from Gemini. This final transformation rewrites the meaning of Gemini energy entirely, turning restlessness into purpose, duality into integration, and thought into awareness. When this strength awakens, Gemini no longer reacts to life. Gemini understands it. If you've ever felt different, misunderstood, or internally divided, this video is a message from the universe calling you to see yourself clearly, not as fragmented but as evolving. Stay with me, because what you're about to discover may change the way you see Gemini forever. Gemini, the sign of the restless mind, communication, and constant movement. Always remembered for curiosity, intelligence, and the ability to move between different worlds. But behind this mental agility lies something much deeper. A silent process of inner evolution that few are able to see. What almost no one realizes is that Gemini is not born strong on the inside. It is built. Every change, every contradiction, every inner conflict leaves marks. And from those marks emerge strengths that only time can reveal. The Gemini mind never rests. Thoughts collide, questions arise without warning, ideas compete for space. For a long time this feels like confusion. But the truth is that this chaos is a laboratory. Gemini observes, tests, fails, learns, and transforms. They feel more than they show, think more than they speak, and carry inner dialogues that no one imagines. With each stage of life, something inside reorganizes itself, and a new strength is born. Do you want to discover the 5 inner strengths Gemini develops throughout life, and that completely change the way they see the world? Prepare yourself, because number 5 will surprise you. Before continuing, subscribe to the channel, leave your like, and activate the notification bell. Your energy strengthens this space and connects us even more deeply with the message from the universe. The strength of conscious adaptation. For Gemini, adapting has never been a choice, it has always been a necessity. From an early age, life presents rapid changes, unstable people, and environments that transform without warning. At first, this can generate anxiety, a sense of not belonging, and even the feeling that nothing is solid enough to rely on. But it is exactly on this unstable ground that one of Gemini's greatest inner strengths is born: conscious adaptation. Unlike simple surface-level flexibility, conscious adaptation emerges when Gemini understands that changing does not mean losing oneself. On the contrary, over time, Gemini learns to adjust course without abandoning their essence. They learn that it is possible to evolve without erasing who they are. Every transition, of life stage, relationships, or mindset, becomes a silent training ground for the mind and spirit. The Gemini sign possesses a sharp perception of the environment. They capture nuances, read contexts, and sense what is left unsaid. At first, this sensitivity causes Gemini to shape themselves too much to others just to fit in. But with time, maturity brings discernment. Gemini begins to choose when to adapt and when to stand firm. This awareness turns change into power, not escape. The strength of conscious adaptation also manifests in Gemini's ability to begin again without carrying the weight of the past. Gemini understands that insisting on structures that have already collapsed only creates suffering. So they let go, adjust, rebuild. Not with coldness but with emotional intelligence. They learn that resisting the flow of life is more painful than learning how to navigate it. Another deep aspect of this strength is the speed with which Gemini learns from experience. They observe mistakes, absorb lessons, and adjust behaviors with mental agility. Where other signs cling to rigidity, Gemini evolves. Where many see loss, Gemini sees learning. This ability makes them resilient in scenarios of instability, crisis, and unexpected change. As the years pass, adaptation stops being instinct and becomes strategy. Gemini no longer changes out of fear but out of clarity. They understand that the world is in constant motion and that surviving and thriving requires awareness, not resistance. This inner strength protects them from excessive attachment, stagnation, and emotional exhaustion. In the end, the strength of conscious adaptation reveals Gemini's true maturity, the ability to reinvent themselves without fragmenting. They change environments but keep their values. They change ideas but preserve their identity. And that is exactly what makes Gemini so difficult to break. Because those who learn to adapt consciously are never defeated by change. They grow through it. The strength of silent emotional intelligence. Gemini does not always show what they feel, and this is often mistaken for coldness, detachment, or superficiality. But in reality, behind the emotional silence there is an observant mind and a heart in constant processing. Gemini's emotional intelligence is not explosive or dramatic. It is silent, analytical, and deeply strategic. And this strength is not something Gemini is born with, it is built over a lifetime. From an early age, Gemini learns to deal with intense emotional stimuli. They perceive shifts in mood, hidden tensions, and unspoken intentions. At first, this sensitivity can create inner confusion, causing Gemini to absorb emotions that are not even their own. But over time, an essential lesson emerges. Feeling does not mean reacting. And it is at this point that Gemini's emotional intelligence begins to solidify. Maturity teaches Gemini to observe before responding. While many act on impulse, Gemini learns to pause, reflect, and analyze the emotional context around them. This pause is powerful. It allows Gemini to understand motivations, identify behavioral patterns, and anticipate conflicts before they even become visible. This ability makes Gemini extremely perceptive in human relationships. Another expression of this strength is the ability to separate emotion from identity. Gemini learns that feeling sadness, anger, or frustration does not define who they are. Emotions pass, awareness remains. This understanding prevents Gemini from getting lost in temporary emotional states. Instead of drowning in feelings, they study them. Instead of being dominated, they learn from them. Over time, Gemini also develops a refined emotional filter. They realize that not everything deserves their emotional energy. They learn to choose their battles, connections, and emotional investments more wisely. This emotional selectivity is not indifference. It is self-preservation. It is silent emotional intelligence protecting their mental health. This strength also appears in the way Gemini handles conflict. They rarely explode. They prefer strategic distance, conscious silence, and attentive observation. While others exhaust themselves trying to prove something, Gemini understands that understanding is more powerful than winning. Often their response is not to react, and this completely disarms the other person. At the deepest level, this emotional intelligence connects Gemini to the message from the universe. They learn to read emotional signals as symbols: discomfort, repetition, subtle sensations. Everything communicates something. By listening more and speaking less internally, Gemini develops self-control, clarity, and emotional balance. In the end, the strength of silent emotional intelligence transforms Gemini into someone difficult to manipulate, difficult to wound, and impossible to deceive for long. They may appear light on the outside, but inside they carry an emotional wisdom built in silence. And that is exactly what makes them so strong. The strength of communication with purpose. For Gemini, communication is as natural as breathing. Words flow, ideas connect, and thoughts find pathways to express themselves. Early in life, this ability emerges spontaneously and often chaotically. Gemini speaks to explore, to understand the world, and to organize their own mind. But over time, communication stops being just expression and becomes purpose. Maturity teaches Gemini that words are not neutral. They build realities, create bonds, awaken emotions, and can also wound silently. Once Gemini realizes this, a deep internal shift occurs. They learn that not everything needs to be said, and that the true power of communication lies in the intention behind the message. This is when the strength of communication with purpose is born. Gemini develops the ability to adapt their language without losing truth. They learn to speak to different people in different contexts, using words that reach, clarify, and connect. This ability turns Gemini into a translator of complex ideas. Someone capable of turning confusion into clarity. Their agile mind builds bridges where noise once existed. Over time, Gemini also learns how to listen, and this changes everything. They understand that communication is not just about speaking well, but about listening attentively. By quieting their own internal dialogue, Gemini begins to grasp what the other truly means. Tone of voice, pauses, contradictions, and silence become just as informative as words. This active listening strengthens bonds and prevents unnecessary conflict. The strength of communication with purpose also manifests as verbal self-control. Gemini learns that words spoken in the heat of emotion carry lasting weight. Because of this, they begin to choose the right moment, the right tone, and the right intention. This maturity protects them from regret and positions them as someone reliable, coherent, and conscious. On a deeper level, Gemini realizes that their voice can become an instrument of the message from the universe. By sharing experiences, insights, and reflections, Gemini does more than communicate, they awaken. Their words begin to carry meaning, direction, and impact. They understand that communication is meant to serve, guide, and illuminate paths, not simply fill silence. In the end, the strength of communication with purpose transforms Gemini into a channel of clarity. They stop speaking from anxiety and start speaking from awareness. Every chosen word reflects inner alignment. And when Gemini speaks from this place, their voice is not only heard, it resonates, endures, and transforms. The strength of integrating one's own duality. Duality has always followed Gemini like a misunderstood shadow. From an early age, Gemini realizes that different voices, opposing desires, and contradictory feelings coexist within. For a long time, this creates inner conflict. The world demands definitions, labels, and consistency. But Gemini feels that they do not fit into a single version of themselves. And at first, this feeling hurts. In youth, duality is experienced as division. Gemini tries to choose one side, silence parts of themselves, and adapt to external expectations. This creates anxiety, guilt, and a constant sense of incoherence. Gemini wonders if they are too much, unstable, or confusing. Few understand that, in truth, Gemini is simply perceiving more layers of reality than most people. Over time, through frustration, change, and self-knowledge, Gemini goes through an essential shift. They understand that they do not need to eliminate their duality in order to be whole. They need to integrate it. This realization marks one of the greatest moments of emotional and spiritual maturity in their life. To integrate duality means accepting that it is possible to feel opposite things without being false. That it is possible to change one's mind without betraying one's essence. Gemini learns that contradiction is not incoherence. It is complexity. They begin to honor all parts of themselves. The rational and the emotional, the light and the deep, the curious and the contemplative. This integration brings psychological freedom. Gemini stops justifying themselves all the time. They stop trying to prove external consistency and begin seeking inner coherence. They understand that identity is not rigidity but alignment. And when this happens, anxiety decreases, guilt dissolves, and self-confidence grows quietly. The strength of integrating one's own duality also appears in the way Gemini relates to others. By accepting their own contradictions, Gemini becomes more tolerant of human flaws. They learn to listen to different points of view without feeling threatened. They are able to move between worlds, ideas, and people with genuine empathy without losing their center. On the deepest level, this integration connects Gemini to the message from the universe. Everything is movement, polarity, and balance. Light and shadow coexist. Reason and emotion dialogue. By understanding this internally, Gemini stops fighting themselves and begins to flow with life. In the end, integrating one's own duality transforms what was once conflict into power. Gemini no longer fragments, they expand. And it is precisely this ability to embrace multiple truths without losing themselves that makes Gemini so whole, so conscious, and so rare. The strength of expanded consciousness. The strength of expanded consciousness does not appear suddenly in Gemini's life. It is the silent result of all previous experiences. Constant changes, inner conflicts, unanswered questions, and countless attempts to understand the world and themselves. After so much thinking, observing, and feeling, something shifts internally. The mind stops running and begins to perceive. Gemini spends much of life searching for explanations. They want to understand people, patterns, emotions, and decisions. At first, they believe everything can be solved through logic and information. But over time, Gemini learns a profound truth. Not everything needs to be understood by the mind. Some answers arise in silence, intuition, and attentive observation of life. This is when consciousness expands. This strength manifests when Gemini learns to distance themselves from their own thoughts. They realize they are not the mind, they observe the mind. This simple shift changes everything. Anxiety decreases, inner conflicts lose strength, and the need for control dissolves. Gemini understands that thoughts are transient, but the awareness that observes them remains. Expanded consciousness also allows Gemini to see life symbolically. Repetitions, encounters, discomforts, and even losses begin to be seen as messages from the universe. Nothing is entirely random. Everything communicates something. This perception deepens Gemini's relationship with time, choices, and destiny itself. They stop reacting automatically and begin responding with presence. With this strength, Gemini develops a rare form of wisdom, the ability to live in the present moment without losing sight of the whole. They no longer get lost in mental excess nor become paralyzed by the future. They learn to trust the flow of life, understanding that every phase has a purpose, even when it does not make immediate sense. Another powerful aspect of expanded consciousness is healthy detachment. Gemini realizes that identity, social roles, and external expectations are temporary. They stop defining themselves exclusively by what they do, say, or think. This inner freedom brings peace. There is no longer a need to prove, convince, or compete. Only to be. At the deepest level, this strength connects Gemini to something greater than the ego. They begin to feel part of a larger movement, a universal intelligence in constant expression. The message from the universe stops being an abstract concept and becomes a daily experience, perceived through small signs, sensations, and synchronicities. In the end, the strength of expanded consciousness transforms Gemini from a seeker into a conscious observer. They do not abandon curiosity, they transcend it. The mind, once restless, becomes an ally. And it is in this state that Gemini reaches their highest expression, lucid, present, and deeply connected to life. If you've made it this far, it was not by chance. This is not just another video, It is a message from the universe reaching you at the right moment. And when the message is real, it asks for confirmation. If this energy touched you, confirm its reception by writing 0303 in the comments. This number is a sign of alignment, awakened consciousness, and connection with what exists beyond the visible. Now, if this message resonated with you, subscribe to the channel, activate the notification bell, and share this video with someone who needs to hear this today. When you share, the message expands, and the universe responds. Remember, nothing here is a coincidence. If you heard it, it's because you were ready.